Hi, everybody. It is Wednesday, May the 20th, and we are going to be talking today about genetics and heredity. The one thing that we're focusing on is traits, whether they are acquired or inherited. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. Let's get started. All right. Depending on what your DNA is, you might have different traits, you might have different behaviors. Now, when we talk about acquired traits and inherited traits, um, inherited traits specifically, the traits that you get from your parents, the way that you look, it's all made up based on the structure of your DNA. DNA is a acronym for a very long word. It stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, so instead of saying that every single time, we just shortened it to call it DNA. DNA is basically a bunch of atoms stuck together. If you've watched Jurassic Park, you've probably heard it referred to as the recipe for all living things. But it's basically um, the it's passed on through every generation to the offspring of children, and like I said, to every successive generation. Let's read this together. DNA is a long molecule. You see it in that picture there. Looks kind of like a twisted ladder, containing it's contained in the nucleus of every cell of every living thing. So that twisted ladder there is found in the nucleus of every cell of every living thing, animals, plants, people. Okay. It contains all of the information about how a living thing will look and function. Every living thing has a unique set of DNA. Mine is not like yours, and yours is not like mine. It is what makes you you. It's what makes you look like yourself. It's what makes you behave the way that you do. Um, all living things have DNA. Like I said earlier, DNA is passed on from biological parents to their offspring. Offspring is just another word for um, their children. Okay. Animals can have offspring, humans can have offspring. It's whatever they reproduce. DNA can replicate itself, meaning that it can make a copy of itself. And when it makes copies of itself, it can be passed down. It says it can pass down its instructions. So you heard me earlier refer to it as a recipe for how the makeup of your body. And those instructions can be passed down to each successive generation. Within your DNA, in that twisted ladder, the rings of the ladder or the rungs of the ladder are the chromosomes. Okay. And within the chromosomes, there are genes. Now, let's talk about what those two things are. Chromosomes are compacted coils of DNA. So you've seen a coil, like a spring that just goes around and around. So within the DNA, there are springs like that. There's coils, and those are the chromosomes compacted, and all the DNA is compacted in there, and it contains your genetic information. Now that brings me to gene. Do you see how gene is a part of the word genetic? Okay. Gene is a specific piece of a chromosome that contains instruction on how to make protein. Now, I've brought up a couple of words that we may not know the meanings to off the top of our head just yet. But just know, like, genetic is talking about the makeup of your genes. This is where the information is on how you look, um, how you function. Okay. This makes that. Let's look at these words that I've brought up. In let's say, a timeline here, I've kind of showed you the process of how these things are made, how we're created, okay? Amino acids, well, let me back up a little bit more. DNA tells amino acids what to do. Okay. And amino acids make proteins, and proteins make cells, and cells make tissue, And when tissue is all put together, that is what organs are made out of. Okay, so tissue brings us to the organs of your body. And when we have all the organs of a body, a living creature is created. So, depending on the write up or the instruction manual or the recipe, whatever you want to call it, within the DNA, it's going to tell the amino acids how to form. It's going to tell the proteins how to form, and the cells how to form, and the tissues how to form, and the organs how to form. And that is what makes us a human being. It's what makes us a girl or a boy or a raccoon or an owl or an ant or a tree. Okay. It depends on the instructions and um, the recipe, like all those words I've mentioned, it depends on what is in that write up, what we become. Now, let's go back to one of those vocabulary words that you heard a while ago. How are offspring, the children, like their parents? So, we've talked about how DNA plays a part in what we are as a person. So, let's talk about how that relates to our parents. We are the offspring of our parents. We've got some kittens here. It looks like a little tiny kitten, maybe is the kitten of the cat on the right. And then we've got some little sprouts that are that are growing and will one day become those um, big ears of corn in the cornfield. Okay, compare and contrast. Let's talk about some ways that the tigers that you see in the picture, how the young tiger and its parent are alike and different just by looking at the picture. We can tell that, um, obviously the sizes are different, but it's going to have those similarities to know that this is the offspring of that tiger. We've got stripes, we've got coloring, we've got four legs, whiskers, things like that. Those are called traits, the things that you just see that make you look like your parents. You might look like your dad, you might look like your mom, and those are called traits. Traits are personal characteristics. They are the things about you, such as how you look or what you like. You might have heard people say that about you, like you look like your dad or your mom. You may like the same kind of foods as your parent. You may like the same kind of music or, um, taste in clothing or whatever it is, but those are all traits that you inherit from your parents. Now, characteristics, we've learned our traits. Let's dive in a little bit more about that. Now, a characteristic of an organism can be classified into two categories. So, those traits that we just talked about, the things that that make up who you are as a person, they are either inherited or acquired. Okay, inherited means that you are getting it from a parent. You're getting it honest, we like to say, or you've acquired it. You've learned it. Okay. Now you are a unique individual, and we all have characteristics. We all have traits. Examples would be eye color is a trait. Maybe you have killer basketball skills. That is also a trait that you can inherit. Let's focus on just inherited traits for right now, shall we? We see a family up in the right top corner that we can already tell have similar traits and characteristics. Looking at the mom and looking at the dad and then looking at the daughter, you can see some inherited qualities that she got from both parents. Her dark hair color, her skin color, her eye color, okay? Inherited traits are received from your biological parents through the DNA, through the genes in the sperm and egg cells. Examples would be natural eye color, hair color, your height. Okay, if you're short like mom or you're tall like mom, you also get your blood type. If you're type O or type A blood type, you get it from your parents. Examples of inherited traits would also be hair color, skin color, height, foot size. If you have birthmarks maybe in the same place, freckles, moles. A lot of you have seen the birthmark in my eyebrow if I teach you and I see you on a day to day basis. You've probably pointed out that, Miss Liz, you have something in your eyebrow, and I've told you it's a birthmark. And the cool thing about that is me and my brother both have the same birthmark in our eyebrow. We also have the same mole under our, it's not like a big mole, but just a little brown dot under our left eye. And so all of that is inherited, and why I don't know, but it's in our DNA. We both share that. And so um as we developed and grew, we both have the same markings, moles, birthmarks, freckles. You might even inherit some diseases in your family or conditions that you were born with. A lot of health issues that we struggle with are things that our ancestors struggled with too. So if your family has a tendency to maybe have high cholesterol or high blood pressure, you might battle that as well. My dad had something called arthritis, and if you don't know what that is, it kind of affects, it's a disease that affects the joints of your body, and it causes you to not be able to move as well. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, we saw our doctor and we were consulting with her, and she shared with me that I have a high risk of developing that same disease later on in life that my father had. So we can also inherit some diseases or conditions through our families as well. All right, acquired traits. These are the traits that, like I said earlier, we learn. Okay, it's not something that we're born with, it's something that may have developed later on in life. Okay, um, examples of that would be things that you are learning, like how to ride a bike, how to read, how to write. Those aren't inherited. You aren't born with the abilities to do those things. You have to learn how to do them. Those are acquired. Things that happen to you, like having, cutting your hair or amputation of a limb, of a finger, an arm, a leg, that is an acquired trait. That is not something that was inherited. Examples of acquired traits, those learned traits and behaviors, would be your mannerisms. Now, sometimes you can have mannerisms that are like your family, but you can also adapt mannerisms where you move or you shift your hands, like people that you've seen before in your life. You've learned it from them. The language that you speak is an acquired trait. You weren't born speaking Spanish. You learned how to speak Spanish because your family taught it to you. You weren't born speaking English. Your family spoke that, you heard it, and you learned it. Your religion is also a learned trait. Um, Something that was taught to you. Food preferences. Now your taste buds can be inherited. You can have a sweet tooth like mom, or like salty things like dad, but you can also learn how to be a good eater. When Juliet was younger, we started introducing her to foods that I personally wasn't introduced to as a kid because I wanted her to be a good eater. So she has learned from an early age how to eat healthy foods that normally a lot of kids would not eat. Music, likes and dislikes, these things can change throughout your lifetime. Favorite sports. Now, your skills you might get from your dad, those might be inherited, but these are things that can change. It's kind of a choice. And when things are a choice, it's not anything that's inherited. Things that are inherited, you can't choose your eye color or your hair color. The choice is not there. So, with a favorite sport, you can see how the choice is there. And that's when you know this is an acquired trait, not inherited. Acquired traits in with you, they cannot be passed down to your children unless they are taught to your children by yourself. They're not in your DNA. Okay, the example would be your kids won't be born with a missing arm if you cut off your arm first. Okay, that's kind of extreme, but it gives you the idea of how acquired traits are not passed on to your children. Now, some traits are both. Skin color is a combination trait. It can be inherited, which means it receives genes for skin color from the parents, like the little girl we saw in the picture. You saw her skin was the same color as her parents. But the acquired part could be you spend a lot of time in the sun getting a suntan. All right, let's do some examples together. And I want you to tell me whether you think it is acquired or inherited. Now, obviously, I can't hear you, but I will click the next slide and you'll be able to see the answer to see if you were correct or not. So, dimples. Would dimples be an acquired trait? Can you learn how to have a dimple? Or is it something that you're born with? Is it inherited? If you said inherited, you would be exactly right. This child has genes from her parents that gives her dimples. All right, here we go. That was the example. Here's number one. If you want to take out a piece of paper and jot down your answers and then check them off as we go and maybe score yourself and see how you do on this, you can pause the video right now and do that. We're going to start with this one. Number one, someone is bilingual, which means they can speak both English and Spanish or English, Spanish, and Mandarin. They just can speak more than one language. Is that acquired or inherited? That is definitely acquired. That is a trait that you learn. You are not born bilingual. Wish we were, but we're not. Number two, you know how to swim. Did you learn that by it? Were you born with that knowledge or did you learn that as you grew up? You learned it, which means acquired. That is an acquired trait. Number three, you have a hitchhiker's thumb. Now think about this. This is the structure and how your thumb is formed. Did you learn how to move your joints like that? Or did your joints just automatically move like that and look like that? Okay. That would be inherited. You cannot tell your joints how to form. We can limber ourselves up and move more freely, but someone that has a straight thumb cannot bend their thumb back like that. Check your thumb out and see what it does. Does yours stick straight up or do you have a hitchhiker's thumb, meaning it goes backwards? Whichever one it is, you inherited that gene. You got that from someone in your family. Number four, a man is blinded from a firework accident. Inherited or acquired? Definitely acquired. Okay. It wasn't something he learned how to do. Let's not use that verbiage in this. That is not the context that we want to be in right now. But a man is blinded from a firework accident. That is something that happened later in his life. He was not born with it. All right, number five, Sarah can roll her tongue. Can you curl your tongue at all? Would that be something that you learned or inherited? Now, this one might be tricky for you. It is inherited, guys. If you can roll your tongue or curl it in any way, you inherited that ability from someone in your family. Number six, you have calluses on your feet. You've been walking, maybe you've been shopping all day, or you've been outside walking in the gravel, or something has caused you to have these calluses on your feet. Is that acquired or inherited? You weren't born with those calluses. That was something that developed over time. Number 7, now let's go from humans to a plant, because remember, plants, animals, people, we all have DNA, okay, that make us who we are. So the traits in a pea plant DNA has purple flowers. Did that pea plant learn how to have purple flowers? Was it sprouted and then, turned yellow and then turned purple, or was it purple from the very beginning? From the time it sprouted up out of the ground, it already knew it was purple. From the time it sprouted up from the ground, it was already purple. It was inherited. It did not sprout and then change and then pick its color. Okay. It knew it was purple from the time it came out of the ground. Number 8, I got to throw a little Harry Potter in here. When Harry got that scar on his head, was that inherited or acquired? If you said acquired, you would be exactly right. Voldemort put that lightning bolt on his forehead after he was born. That was something that developed over time. Number 9, a bush has trimmed limbs. Someone went out there and cut the hedges. Was that acquired or inherited? Definitely acquired. Somebody it was a lot of work that someone put into this to make those hedges look beautiful like that. All right, a mouse with a cut tail. You can see here that this little mouse is struggling. His tail has been injured somehow, and this one is perfectly fine. Would that be inherited or acquired? Now, some of you may be saying, well, this could be, an animal can be born with, as an animal can be born deformed or have something wrong with it. But that's not what it says here. It says with a cut tail. Okay, so this mouse's tail somehow was cut. It was in an accident. Would that be acquired or inherited? It would definitely be acquired. So think about that mouse's, even though it can be born with deformed in some way, it doesn't mean that they got that, they were deformed like that from their parents. Okay, just because you remember that statement, just because you were in an accident and maybe lost a finger, it doesn't mean you're going to have an offspring with the same missing finger. Okay, so even though it was something that maybe this mouse was born with or could have been born with, it doesn't necessarily mean it's inherited. So you have to be specific and think about what acquired and what inherited means. Yes, we can say that inherited means that you were born with it, but you have to back up a little bit and know that it means that you got it from a family member. Okay? It always means that you got it from a family member. It was passed down to you. All right? You might hear us say it was something that you were born with, but you have to know that when we say that, we're talking about it was something that was passed on to you. All right, a brown calf has brown parents. Did he get that from his parents or was it learned over time? And it was inherited. A fish has gills to breathe underwater. That would definitely be inherited. He did not acquire that, or his parents didn't tell him how to do that after he was born. He was born with that ability because his parents had that ability. A tree is bent due to the harsh winds of where it grows. The wind is blowing so much that it starts to bend the tree and the tree just starts to grow in a bent formation. Is that acquired or inherited? Definitely acquired. It was something that happened over time. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of, is this trait inherited or acquired? If you have any questions, please reach out to myself, Miss Hall, or Miss Vania as you work this week. Wish you luck. See you later.